What's up,
Hello.
Trent?
Hi.
Oh,
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good. It's pretty late here, but you guys are waking up.
Yeah, for sure. I've been up for a few hours. I like to get up early sometimes. So.
Oh yeah, me too. I like that too. All right, so let's see. Let's get one more round of Telegram in, and then we can start the show.
I apologize in advance that I don't have my Biddle Ocean shirt. It's in the wash right now. So instead, I have an unofficial Ocean shirt. So,
Who made that one?
just Amazon.
Oh.
Amazingly, if you go to Amazon and type in jellyfish T-shirt, you'll see like dozens of different jellyfish T-shirts. As of a year ago, there was more jellyfish T-shirts than there were for all of blockchain. It's amazing. So it made me very happy.
That's pretty funny. The unofficials.
Yeah.
yeah, we have to ship you some of the Biddle Ocean stuff, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I have one myself that I just bought off the store, but if you want to send me more, great. Yeah, I just couldn't wear it today because I was wearing it the other day and it's now dirty and in the wash.
Mm-hmm.
Yo, weren't you in the... I think you came in late on that town hall last Wednesday, I think, Robin. But
Yeah.
Trent showed off his shirt.
Yeah, I'm always late. All this work stuff is really bad, you know, if you have a day job. Now I quit it. It's good. I'm on vacation right now. After that, only 50% left to work for 3 months, and then
that's
full-time
Yes.
Ocean.
Very happy to hear that. That's great.
Yeah,
I was wondering how you possibly managed to do it up until now. The last 3 months and 6 months must have been insane. So.
I'm doing this now for 2 years. So I started with a job at SingularityNet, part-time job, in May 2019. And since then, I've been working two things or three things at the same time. And yeah, it's just exhausting. So yeah,
much easier to focus on one thing. I had a similar thing when I was doing my PhD. I was also doing my second startup. So I would work for 8 hours in my PhD. I was single at the time, no kids. I only saw my girlfriend on weekends. So on 8 hours on PhD, and then I'd go home and work for 8 hours on my startup. And I did that 5 days in a row, boom, boom. And then I'd take 2 days off on the weekend and repeated that for several years. It worked, but it was totally exhausting.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
You gotta do what you gotta do, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so on that point of, I guess, building startups and stuff, it says in your bio that some of your past projects is, I think, it says painting, BCI hacking, hypnosis, video game programming, and surfing. How's the hypnosis? I actually bought like a hypnosis book from like this antique store.
Yeah.
Do you really do hypnosis?
Yeah, as a past project, I was always fascinated by it, and yeah, I ran it across a book many years ago, like 20 years ago now, in a random bookstore that said like hypnosis theory and practice, and it was just a little book, 150 pages to 200 pages. So I read it. It took a few hours, and I read it, and there was sort of like a 30-page section in the center that was basically a step-by-step guide of like how to walk someone through the path of how to hypnotize someone. So then I'm like, that's interesting. So then I tried it. I sat down with a friend and just had him sit down and said, hey, I'm going to hypnotize you. I'm going to try to hypnotize you. And then I did. It was amazing. So that was a hobby for a while. I was just hypnotizing friends.
Really? So how many people have you hypnotized?
Well, usually I would, for the full hypnosis, probably maybe 5 or 6. But then you can sort of do a lightweight semi-trance state. And I've done that with groups of like 10 people at a time. I just did that 2 or 3 times with a bunch of cousins that came over Christmas one year, and that was hilarious too. I had all my 15-year-old cousins and stuff in a room hypnotized, and some of their parents came in and they're like, "What are you doing, Trent?" So it was amazing though, right? So yeah, so maybe the book you have too, it's a similar book, and it's kind of amazing how malleable the mind is. It was a really cool learning actually. So yeah. But I
Yeah,
didn't get to the level of Jedi Master of like being able to hypnotize someone by snapping my fingers or something, right? They really have to know that I'm doing it. So
yeah, turning them into chickens.
I was doing stuff like that. You know, I told a friend that the number 6 no longer existed, and then I asked him to count the number of fingers on his hand, and he came up with 11, and he looked at me like the most sad puppy ever.
So he knew that the result was wrong, but he couldn't count the number 6.
Yeah, exactly right. He just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then looked at me and I'm like, how many fingers do you have in your hand? He's, how many do you count? 11. How many do you have? 10. So what's going on? And he couldn't resolve it, right? So confused and sad. So this sort of stuff is really, really fun, right? Lots of things you can do. Or just telling that they have one balloon tied to the finger, and then 2, and then 10, and then 100. And as soon as you say 100, their hand just goes zoom, like up like that. So really, really fun to do stuff like that. And it's amazing. Like I never thought it would be so easy to get to do. But, you know, the book was just really, you know, a very good guideline, and I just tried it. Sometimes you just have to jump in with 2 feet, right? And it works.
Yeah, definitely. So I think Robin wanted to ask you some stuff. I know someone just said something in the chat. Hey Trent, when will C2D be integrated? Sorry if I've missed this question already.
Yes. So compute to data has been in the back end and the drivers since the V3 release last fall, and we have been working steadily and diligently with a lot of the team for all of 2021 so far to get it into the Ocean market, and it should be coming out shortly. If not right, you know, at the very, you know, in time for the precise date of by end of Q1, within, you know, a week or two. So we'll release it when it's, you know, sufficiently tested and stuff in a way where we're happy, but it's close. So
I mean, there's a pull request on the market in GitHub. So I mean, it's already 12 days old. So I looked at it a little bit. There's a ton of 10 of changes. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So and sometimes we just like to bang this out and iterate against it and stuff, right? Like so, and this first version, it won't be, you know, it'll have a lot of features, but there's still a lot of features to go. Compute to data is quite a rich feature that opens up to a lot of other features, right? So this will be the first cut, and you can expect continued iterations by the team to keep improving it.
And will there then also be a marketplace for algorithms? So like, you know, that what you can execute?
Yeah, so the way that compute to data works, like it would be an Ocean market itself. The way that compute to data works, you can have it where the data itself is private and the algorithm is some algorithm that's either public or vetted by the publisher. And in that way, it has to be at least transparent to the publisher, right? So that's one scenario, private data, public algorithm in a sense. Or you can flip it around and have public data and private algorithm, right? And in the latter thing, that can also be, you know, bought and sold on the Ocean market as its own data token asset, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, the backend already supports that, and you'll see it in the front end too, which is super exciting, right? Because yeah, we haven't had this before in a big way, and it's kind of cool to have the choice of one or the other. And at some point, there will be support for both at once, but that requires a lot more sort of crypto-y research, and it's not going to be, you know, in the next while. But the OpenMind guys are researching that in earnest, so when they get a lot further along, then we're happy to incorporate that.
Go ahead, Jim.
Okay. Well, I was just gonna ask: is there anybody on the market, or like on the market, or just any other project that has like come out with like a C2D, or like just not even in like blockchain space, but in, you know, just
in blockchain space, no one to my knowledge. In other space, Snowflake has something a little bit like this, and you know, they went public last year, and their valuation is, I don't know, 50 billion, 100 billion or something, right? So you can view them in some ways as sort of a centralized version of what Ocean is. So it kind of gives you a feel of the level of how advanced Ocean is in that way, right? The thing is, with compute to data, it's one of many approaches to preserving privacy. A lot of the other approaches get a lot more press because And you can ask why, right? Like, why do they get more press? These are things like multi-party compute or homomorphic encryption, zero knowledge proofs, etc. And my guess is that they have basically, people promote them simply because they come from academia, and in academia you can only publish something if you have something novel and stuff, right? So it's really hard to publish doing a bit of DevOps, basically, which is what computed data is. It's not a fancy invention. It's just a very simple, pragmatic DevOps thing conceptually, right? Like, whereas multi-party compute has a bunch fancier math. Same thing with homomorphic encryption, et cetera, right? So for those things, you can get lots of publications in cryptography conferences and privacy conferences and so on. But computed data, sort of traditionally, that concept hasn't been as widespread, simply because there haven't been the academic conferences and venues to publish and stuff. But now that things are starting to hit the real world, when the rubber hits the road for the real world, computed data makes the most sense of all of them. And actually, interestingly, as the other things get mature enough to use in the mainstream, then they can combine nicely with computed data anyway. And you guys might remember I published a blog post about that about a year ago, right? I think it was called something like, how does compute-to data relate to other privacy-preserving approaches? So,
yeah, I mean, from my point of view, computed data is just very intuitive. I don't have to do much, right? I mean, I have my Docker containers, and then I can use them anyways. But I mean, I'm looking forward to publishing some algorithm assets, like YOLO v5 or something, like the open source stuff. If you can make a container for that and people can buy it, I think that will be really helpful, like of all the algorithms, but especially for data union app, we need a lot of them. So yeah,
that's awesome.
This will be very, very interesting, like then people can also come up with new algorithms, and we can even create algorithms out of the data, publish those again, and so on and so forth. So yeah.
Absolutely. I know, like, I have many friends who had once been, starving AI PhD students, and they would have loved to be able to find ways to monetize what they were doing, and without having to resort to, working at a place like Google that farms people, right? So this is actually a very nice venue for that, right? Where you can, monetize your algorithms, and within the context of data union, all the better, right? Because then it's even lower friction. So
cool. So someone in the chat asked, can you inform us about the status of the Bonsai's marketplace? I don't know if you know that.
The what marketplace? Bonsai's?
Yeah, Bonsai's. I don't know what Bonsai's is.
I don't know what that means, but it's not an official Ocean thing anyway. Like I think from the OPF core team, I mean, we don't like to say the word official generally. So you'd have to ask that team, whoever's building it, right?
Yeah, interesting. So I did want to, I guess, just get a little bit of some background. I know you started like two projects, like Solido, and like I guess Solido was like, that was your startup, right? And you were developing something like with Moore's Law. How did you end up like going from that to like Ocean Protocol? Did you end up meeting like the people or like networking into Ocean Protocol, or like meeting with like Bruce and then meeting with, did it start from that, or?
Sure, the lineage is longer actually. It dates back, when I was really young, growing up in rural Canada, I was hacking on computers. Then I did undergraduate at University of Saskatchewan in rural Canada, in computer science and engineering. That was in the early 90s. That's where I met Bruce. He was also studying engineering. And we've actually kept in touch ever since. So then as summer jobs, I was actually working for the Canadian Department of Defense, doing AI research. I couldn't believe that someone would pay me to do AI back then, because I was reading, the neural networks journals and all that, big nerd on this. And I just got my dream job, someone paying me to do AI. And in that, actually, I was having to do things like build AI classifiers of radar. You have this audio radar that's listening in on these audio signals, and the classifier had to say, this is a flock of birds, this is a bunch of people walking by, et cetera, et cetera. And at the beginning of the summer, I think it was like 55% accuracy, like 45% error, which is terrible, of course. And after the first summer, I got up to 65% accuracy, 35% error, which is still like terrible, completely unusable. And the thing is, I had a fixed size data set, right? I was sort of given this data set thrown over the wall to me. I had no context beyond the data set and a few words told by my supervisor. So I couldn't go and get more data. I didn't really know how. And I was so junior, I didn't know to ask for more, right? And this is actually a really good reference for the problem with data, right? Like, if you have an AI model that is just really terrible accuracy, you could try to improve the algorithm, which I did that first summer and that second summer. But even after the second summer, it was a terrible model. Or you can just try to get more data. And that's what Google and others started to really recognize in the mid 2000s. Actually, Microsoft was first with a really cool paper from the early 2000s. And then Google wrote a paper about it in the mid 2000s on the unreasonable effectiveness of data. So going back to my history, that was my first experience with modeling and data in the real world. Then I actually did 2 startups related to AI. The first was creative AI. Now we see a lot of stuff on creative AI with things like deepfakes and so on. But I was doing this actually in the late 90s, early 2000s. And we were applying it to analog circuit design. That startup got acquired. So on the heels of that, I started another startup, also for circuit design, but this time focusing on helping to drive Moore's law, basically addressing the crazy manufacturing variations that would happen as transistors got smaller. And we basically said, let designers keep designing like they're always doing. They hate using statistics, by the way, because they all had bad experiences in university typically. So they hate using statistics. Let them use their traditional tools, and then let AI do all the work under the hood to take care of all the crazy stats. So that's what we did, and that was Solido. And we built that up, and it got acquired about 5 years ago. And at the same time, I did a PhD in analog circuits, AI for analog circuits, also. So basically, from the late 90s up till my entry into blockchain, I was doing AI, at scale for industry, but also with an academic twist, and all in the realm of semiconductors. And then in 2010, I bought some Bitcoin, not a lot, lost those keys long ago. In 2013, I started to really get blockchain. And so I started this project on the side, which grew into Ascribe, which was IP on the blockchain for digital art and more. These days, that whole movement is called NFTs. But yeah, we did the first art blockchain platform back in 2013, 2014. We actually also got decent traction, but ran into issues of scale. So we pivoted towards a scalable blockchain database. That was BigChainDB. And that had decent traction, but also we realized that monetization was really hard, long-term sustainability, and started to realize that tokens were really powerful, and especially as sort of this incentive machine to get people to do stuff. And so we pivoted from BigChainDB into doing Ocean, where it had a public permissionless blockchain at the heart of it, with incentives built in, right? And that's Ocean, right? And we've been working on that since, myself in earnest since early 2017. And that's basically what led to Ocean in general, right? Like, an Ocean, in a sense, combines all of these past experiences from my very first, professional job, where I ran into the problem of data for AI, to AI at scale with real world deployments in semiconductor, to IP on the blockchain with Ascribe, because data is also IP is data. And finally, big data and blockchain, which is BigChainDB. So drawing on all of those things, plus our learnings in token design and token engineering. And so Ocean is sort of learnings of a bunch of stuff from the past. And that's kind of how we arrived at doing it, because of all those past experiences, which meant we were quite early. And we had to, keep iterating and refining the idea, which is, where we are now. So, as you saw with Ocean, V1 was the start, V2 brought in one big solution, like brought in the first big problem, like solved the first big problem, which was how do you handle privacy? The answer is computed data. And V3 solved another big problem, which is how do you price data? And the answer is AMMs, right? So that brings us to today, right? That was a bit of a longer answer, I'm sorry, but hopefully that provides some context to where all this came from.
Data Ocean Turtle said, if you ask Trent one question, you get 100 answers on questions you haven't even asked yet.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I can keep it
That's
short
funny.
too.
Yeah, no worries.
No,
No,
no.
no. Yeah. We like it. This is funny. But so I guess the problem with I guess when you did ascribe, because I know the whole NFT movement is like super popping now, and just like you guys were super early. I guess the scaling issue was it just because it was just on Bitcoin or like on that network or
Well, so yeah, we built it on Bitcoin. We actually developed a thin protocol on top called Spool. And when we first started working on Bitcoin, it was like 1 cent for a transaction in Bitcoin, or maybe even like less than that. And then as we were working on Ascribe, it grew up to 10 cents. And that was fine for artists who were publishing, one piece every month or so. But we started to iterate with large scale photography platforms. For example, one company was adding 100,000 photographs a day, and they wanted to use Ascribe to register these works and with copyright, etc., to ascribe them. And we wanted to help them, but at 100,000 photos a day, that meant 10,000 new transactions on Bitcoin blockchain. 100,000 transactions in Bitcoin blockchain at a cost of $10,000, and that just simply wasn't feasible. So, and we could have tried lumping all these transactions together, but that would have really killed the provenance, the history of ownership of each of these different photos. So we started looking around, and by that time, when we hit these issues, this was mid 2015. So we were bugging our friends at Ethereum, saying, "Hey, when are you going to get scaling?" And they've been writing about it and stuff, but they're like, "Trent, this is years away." So we said, "Okay, well, if it's years away for Ethereum, how does Facebook scale? How does Google scale?" And we dug into that, and of course, the answer was distributed databases like MongoDB and stuff. So we said, "Well, what if we wrapped MongoDB?" And that's what led to BigChainDB and everything from there. So that's the reason then for Ascribe was that we had Ascribe, but we no longer have been driving Ascribe. Was scale got in the way of our ability to get real traction, and the art market for just digital art and so on at the time just wasn't there. We had decent traction, but especially by Web3 standards, right? Like 10,000 plus users. But Web3 didn't even exist as a concept. So all the standards were Web2. And some website with 10,000 users in Web2 land, you can't get further rounds of funding for that, right? So it was important and necessary basically to pivot. And that's what led us to BigChainDB and so on. But the dream of Ascribe lives on in two ways. We kept Ascribe going, by the way, because we didn't want to hurt any of our existing community. We kept it going until we saw that NFTs had grown sufficiently to hand off to for all those artists to hand them off to the Ethereum-based NFT platforms. So we did that. I believe it was sometime in late 2017 or sometime in 2018. I forget, somewhere in there. And that helped us feel good about things because we didn't want to leave anyone high and dry. And of course for Ocean, though, Ocean drew on all those learnings with the fact that data is IP, and Ascribe was at its heart an IP platform. And given that data is IP, Ocean at its heart actually is an IP platform too. It's not just for data. It can handle all this other stuff too, right? It can handle digital art, it can handle all these other things, and it actually has a proper way of thinking about licensing, unlike most of the other NFT things out there. So that's a bit of a summary. Just other platforms weren't scaling. Now we're at better scaling, right? Like even Ethereum, it wasn't scaling in 2015 because it was still proof of work, etc. It's really hit problems in the last year because the only way you can justify paying high gas fees is if you're an AMM arb bot, basically. That's what has led to things like Polygon and others that are picking up the slack for all the other applications. I'm very hopeful for all the future advances in scaling. But in my view, gas fees are solved thanks to things like Polygon. So that's also, I guess, a bit of a longer answer, but hopefully it's also thorough.
Yeah, definitely. So going back, I guess, shoot, what was going it's so late. I do have I had a long day, super long day. But what was I gonna so with Ocean and then I guess IP, so I guess what you're saying is that essentially with like the data tokens, basically you're accessing with the data token the access to IP, right? into the intellectual property or whatever is like behind it, right?
Yes. So exactly. So if you have 1.0 data tokens, then you have the right to access that IP, and you actually have the right not only according to the technology as it's implemented with blockchain, et cetera, but according to the legals, right? So inside Ocean Market, when you register a work, it ties a contract to it, a legal contract that says, when I'm registering, I'm claiming that I have copyright or exclusive license. And then when someone else has 1.0 of these tokens, they are claiming that they have the license, the right to access this thing. And when you send the 1.0 of those tokens to the publisher to redeem it, the publisher looks at this and says, okay, you have the legal right because you're coming to me with 1.0 tokens. So in the end, there's sort of two types of protection. There's the technology protection, which is the blockchain, et cetera. And there is the legal protection, which is the basis of IP and specifically copyright law, and then the contracts on top for sublicensing. So that's what Ocean Market is.
Yeah, and how is that, I guess, how is like all the legal contracts built into Ocean?
Yeah, so actually it's the contract itself. If you go to Ocean Market, you'll see when you publish, there's a near the bottom, right above the publish button, there is a section there that says terms and conditions, and it shows the text. And we tried to make that as short and easy to read as possible. And that actually gets linked to the publication of the data token, right? And you can actually put in your own terms and conditions too, if you want to have some different sets of terms and conditions. But yeah, that's how they're linked. So it's inside the DDO basically. And this goes back, by the way, like to what we did in Ascribe days, but also even back further, people were doing with other sort of ledgers for electronic cash, even pre-blockchain, with the idea of Ricardian contracts, which Ian Grigg invented in 1996, I believe. So yeah, so there's a long history of this. It makes a lot of sense, and we're just using, the thinking that has accumulated over the years to approach this in a really clean way for both technology protection and legal protection.
Yeah, so Disney, like right now, could publish, I guess, sets of like their IP of like Marvel or whatever their characters, or just even, whatever data they have right now on Ocean, and that they would be protected in some way,
Yes, yeah. I mean, when they publish it, they're saying, yeah, we claim that we have the copyright or the exclusive license, which they do. And then from that, they, if they choose, they can sublicense with ERC20 data tokens. They can sublicense to people for various uses, right? It could be, let's say you've got Snow White, the movie, right? They could have 1,000 different ERC20 tokens for that. And each ERC, like one ERC20 contract with 1,000 tokens minted. And if you hold 1.0 of those tokens, maybe you would have the right to watch it, right? So that's sort of watch it for the next 48 hours. That's the streaming use case, right? But there could be even, Disney could publish a different ERC20 token contract, also for Snow White, and have it where there's maybe 20 tokens minted, and 1.0 of those tokens means that you are allowed to remix the movie and make a new movie as a derivative of the original Snow White movie, right? That would be an example of remix rights, right? And there's standard practice for this, right? It's not like we have to reinvent this. I mean, there's whole industries around this, right? Like the music industry is $10, $15 billion industry. Video games is $100 billion, et cetera, et cetera. And the foundation of every single one of these industries is intellectual property, copyright, et cetera, right? So the legals have been worked out in great detail, right? And there's a lot of legal support around this too, right? Like in Germany, for example, if I am uploading files to the internet that don't belong to me, like movie files, then I will get a letter in the mail from the authorities or lawyers charging me for unlicensed usage of that movie, right? And I think it's like 150 or 300 euros or something, right? So and the same thing for photographs, et cetera. So there's a really robust legal regime around this and protections, right? And just because you're in blockchain doesn't mean you can run away from this, right? Like this is actual tangible stuff called intellectual property, and it's the basis for all these industries.
So, do you think so I know there's a different, I was just in the Telegram for, I guess, one of our for like BDP, and they talked, I know their thing is like a whole like professional like data sets on their marketplace, but
Yeah.
Professional data sets could be on Ocean Marketplace too, right? And it's not just like, I guess, is it just going to be easier for professionals, or like, I guess, companies to find professional data sets on their marketplace rather than on Ocean, since Ocean is more like a generalized data marketplace? Or what?
Yeah, Ocean is a generalized data marketplace, which means that it includes, data sets from individuals or small organizations. But there are already professional data sets on there, right, from people that spent real time at it. So any project that forks the front end market code has their prerogative to market things however they want, right? It's permissionless, so people can do what they want. But the fact of the matter is that Ocean Market also has professional data sets, and importantly, all the data sets, by default, Ocean, anything registered in Ocean Market or with Ocean Protocol in general goes onto the blockchain, and the metadata is there in a public readable way. So someone else could go and create their own market and populate it with all the data sets that Ocean Market has, and that's completely fine. Or they can filter it to a subset, et cetera, right? So this is all of the above, right? So it's important to distinguish, what Ocean Protocol offers from the marketing choices of various projects that use Ocean tools.
Yeah.
So in the BDP marketplace, you also have to register before you can publish. It's not permissionless. You cannot just publish something because there's the marketplace. You always have to register with your own information. And I mean, that's maybe why they market it more as professional, because not everybody can publish something.
You have to be whitelisted.
You have to go through the process. Yeah, so that's it's a big difference between the two marketplaces.
Sure, and I mean overall, there are, we've been working with several enterprise grade marketplace clients, like people who are building their own marketplaces, and some of them want there to be more fine-grained permissioning around various aspects, such as who can publish in the marketplace, who can view items in the marketplace, who can consume, etc. Right? And so we've been doing this, and some of the results of this is what BDP will be able to use. So, and you'll see some of this in some of the GitHub issues even that are currently slated for Q3 to be public, but actually the GitHub issues are already public, and we're going to see stuff a lot sooner. So it's important to clarify that there's a lot of marketplaces getting built that are forks of Ocean Market, including the BDP fork of Ocean Market, but other ones too. And they have different flavors and different levels of permissioning. Ocean Market on purpose is meant to be as open as possible, and meant to be sort of this shelling point for marketplaces. But that said, we encourage an Ocean core team, other people to make fully open marketplaces too, and just with better experiences. And there are some like that too coming out.
So with BigChainDB, don't you guys have like what exactly is BigChainDB? Don't you guys have like a bunch of like data sets or data that could be put on the market, or is that just more for like companies to go to you guys to store data?
Well, BigChainDB there's the history of the company and the project. So we founded a Scribe GmbH, a German limited liability company, in 2014. The project started in 2013. And when we pivoted towards focusing on BigChainDB software, we renamed the company to BigChainDB GmbH. In 2016 and especially 2017, that company also embarked upon the project to create Ocean Protocol, and co-founded the Singapore nonprofit called Ocean Protocol Foundation. So BigChainDB means two things. It means the company, and it means the software artifact. As you can see if you go to github.com/BigChainDB. So the software artifact, as we shifted our focus to Ocean, a lot of the work on the software artifact called BigChainDB got taken over by IPDB Foundation, which is a separate nonprofit foundation that we spun out, and folks at Riddle and Code and Yolicon and others worked on the technical side of that. So now, BigChainDB, the company, its sole focus is helping to drive forward Ocean Protocol, the artifact. And there's actually several companies working together as part of the Ocean core team to help drive forward Ocean Protocol, the software artifact, right? There's the BigChain core team, and there's several other companies and individuals helping drive it forward. Does that clarify? Maybe it's more confusing yet, but I guess the summary then is that BigChainDB, the software artifact, is just a software artifact. It's not a bunch of data. So there's no data to put into Ocean per se that way.
Mm-hmm. So it was just basically like you guys made software,
yeah,
I guess, with that company. Okay, interesting. I wanted, I guess, get into let's see. Robin, did you have anything?
Yeah, sure, but my questions are more like technical questions. So, no, I mean it's more of a philosophical thing. I mean, like what I'm wondering about is like now Ocean is available on 2 blockchains. We have 2 marketplaces, but yeah, the liquidity providers or like the data set providers, they have a struggle now. Which blockchain should they choose? Do they want to limit their liquidity pools, or do they have to have 2 liquidity pools and stuff like this? So I mean, I looked at the new version of Balancer coming out, and there they're saying, okay, the liquidity pools are more like a front end, and everything is like in one big data set, a data token pool in the back end. Like everything is unified. So I mean, this would in a way could also enable then the marketplaces of Ocean to be like on all blockchains, but to have like for each data set, the data provider could say, okay, I have one liquidity pool somehow in the backend. Like everybody can interact with it from all the different chains. It does not matter anymore. I mean, Ocean is bridged to all of them. So how they interact with it, how they put in the Oceans and the data tokens also does not matter anymore. It all becomes like one liquidity pool. Is this also a vision that you are sharing, that is something like this would be possible in the future?
Absolutely, yeah. So, but it's going to be a while before we get there in terms of technology maturity, not only of Ocean, but also of Balancer and other technologies, right? So, maybe by the end of 2021 or somewhere early into 2022, it would have that full vision where you just go to market.oceanprotocol.com and you see the full listing of all the different data sets. And when you hit transfer and all that, your wallet would have to be attached to one chain probably, or maybe otherwise. And then it's just very straightforward to do. And the pools themselves, you could have a pool where token A is living on blockchain 1 and token B is living on blockchain 2. And so it's not even, you don't have to even bridge per se, right? And so that's going to be the experience. And then to work backwards to what we have now, basically we're trying to do the highest bang for the buck things first to approximate that experience as close as possible with the pragmatics of the now, right? So basically, what can we do in the next 9 months, 12 months to hold everyone over or to gradually get there bit by bit by bit, right? So first of all, we've actually, within the Ocean Protocol core team, we actually have a special sub-team dedicated just to multi-chain, right? And that's the sub-team that focused on rolling out Polygon, and as well as in iterations with a Moonbeam team, et cetera, right? Excuse me. And now that Polygon is rolled out, we have these other next step things that we can be doing to help. And probably the lowest hanging fruit next is to say, okay, for the metadata cache, Aquarius, why not cache across more than one chain, right? You don't need to have a metadata cache just for one chain. You can have on many. So this is what we're going to next, and it can be where you can have 2 different Aquariuses running, or you can have one Aquarius that has the data side by side, and we're investigating both. But then as far as the Ocean market is concerned, it's viewing metadata from 2 different chains, right? And that's basically coming down the pipe. And I saw there's another marketplace that's that uses Ocean under the core that already shows across 2 chains, which I think was great. That was just a few days ago. So basically Ocean Market will be supporting that as well. And it was very cool to see someone else did it before Ocean core team. That's great news.
But there you can't interact with it's just an index,
Yeah.
But anyways, but it shows everything. So it's an index for both chains.
Exactly, and to sort of extend from this, right? So let's say that so at first, we're gonna keep with this rule of wherever a data token is published, whatever chain it's published on, that's where you need to consume. That simplifies the complexity and keeps the design space manageable. And then, so if you want to, if you bought a data token, then you have to, let's say that, you would want to consume on there. And generally, we anticipate that at first data tokens wouldn't be bridging across a lot of chains because there's also technology constraints there. So to start with, if you have a data token published on Polygon, then you'd be adding liquidity on Polygon and consuming on Polygon or Ethereum mainnet or otherwise. But then, and so if you see this on Ocean Market, where Ocean Market, you can see data tokens on Ethereum mainnet and Polygon at once. You say, okay, I want to buy this data token that happens to be on Polygon. Then you have to make sure that your wallet is connected to Polygon and goes through. Then the next step would be where there is a better support for data tokens across chains, right? Like ERC20 data tokens across chains. And this comes in 2 forms. It comes in traditional ERC20 bridges, just like Ocean is being bridged between Ethereum mainnet and Polygon. And also there's actually been this emergence of AMMs where one set of tokens is on chain A and the other set of tokens is on chain B. And I believe it's AnySwap that is the pioneer on this, and it's using some technology under the hood developed by Fusion, a lesser known ICO from 2017 era, and this is being adopted by Cream and Yearn and others. So that's actually pretty cool. It's advanced more quickly in the last 6 months than I would have expected actually. And then this is the direction that Balancer, treasuries, et cetera, can be going and to, of course. So those are 2 types of bridges, right? One is sort of a combination, like one is just a pure bridge where you have to, stake a token on, say, Ethereum mainnet, and then get a 1-for-1 token minted on Polygon or vice versa. But the other one is where you basically have, an AMM that has tokens on each side. And it's not just AnySwap that's doing this. There are several Polkadot projects that are focusing on doing a job here too, such as PolkaSwitch. But their timing is later in the year, given that they're really relying on the full-fledged Polkadot functionality, and that's getting rolled out, throughout the year, right? Polkadot is a multi-year project. It's got a lot of moving parts, so we can expect that it's going to come bit by bit by bit. But the good news is, this is, Ocean itself doesn't have to do a lot of the heavy lifting. We can leverage best-in-class improvements that have been coming down the pipe that we're seeing in DeFi with AnySwap, et cetera, in the Polkadot ecosystem, et cetera, right? And, we keep, monitoring this and iterating with projects as needed, always with an eye towards, okay, what's the highest bang for the buck thing that we could do next on the multi-chain setting?
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming from the direction that should I move over to Polygon? Should I not move it? I mean, I could rug pull my own data set, take everything, move it over there, distribute it like it was before. It will cost a little bit of gas, but it's not such a big problem. But then it would be a way to move the data sets completely to Polygon. But now my liquidity providers are saying, but we should be on Ethereum still somehow. And I'm like, okay, how should I do this? It's complicated, But I think that nobody really does this right now. So, I mean, like moving stuff from one chain to the other or something like this, I think it's a very, very new thing to do. So
yeah, exactly. So I mean, to that point, right? We agree with that sort of question that you described, and the ideal is to be able to bridge, right? So you just have one initial place that you publish, and right before we published and announced the Polygon deployment, etc. As you know, we came up with a rule to basically softly help people who have tokens on Ethereum mainnet, right? Which is if your liquidity gets below a threshold of 1,000 Ocean, then it's okay, and it wouldn't be considered a rug pull, and that could be enforced simply by purgatory, which is a manual enforcement anyway. If you so that's, but like you say, and we basically put that out there because we wanted to see what happened, and if people moved on their own without extra incentives, great. What you're describing to me is that maybe that's not enough incentive on its own, right?
No, I mean, the problem about this is that the order of the people, getting the news matters. Like if then somebody can take out the tokens at first or sell their share of the liquidity, they will get more. So it's inherently unfair, like the person who is last, they will suffer the most, but there's no, I mean, in the end, it was a decision by the data set provider, like that they want to move. So yeah, it should not be like this. So I mean, in the sense of fairness, it should be like taking a snapshot, being able to replicate this on the other chain, and then everybody is like in the same position. But I mean, that will require some AML magic, that you. Yeah. So maybe the idea would be then I should talk to Balancer, or should I talk to the Ocean team to make up a plan that really would be foolproof, like something that can be simulated and then later could be replicated again.
Yeah. So. It's important to separate the idea of a data token from the idea of markets for data tokens, right? So think about Ocean token for a second, right? Ocean token was, deployed, a contract deployed by the Ocean team, and then seeded to a primary market via, pre-seed, seed offerings, then via the IEO, et cetera, right? And those were sort of the primary markets. But once the tokens were distributed, then other secondary markets started to list Ocean, right? So like DEXs, like Uniswap and Balancer, et cetera, as well as centralized exchanges. And the first one was Bittrex, but now there's Binance and more, of course. So all of these are, there's dozens of different markets for that, the ERC20 token known as Ocean. Data tokens are no different. They are ERC20 tokens, and there can be dozens of markets for any one of them. You can take your data tokens and you can publish them in Uniswap if you want, as a Uniswap pool, or Bancor, or Balancer, or Balancer even with like an index fund of 8 different tokens, as I did just to prove a point once. So in my view, like if you say, okay, there is to this question of fairness around pulling out of a given pool and stuff, right? That just happens to be the primary market for those particular tokens, right? And let's say that there was another secondary market or other secondary markets. Those are other markets. That's it, right? And it's no easy answer, but at the end of the day, there can be multiple markets for a given data token, and so it's sort of a big question mark of is it actually unfair if people pull out of their liquidity out of a particular market for a data token, right?
Inherently, it's not unfair, but if basically the creator initiates something like, okay, I'm moving over there, then I think it's just somehow fair to the participants to help them to not lose any of their value, in this transition phase, So that's basically my intention. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So like conceptually, how is the idea of the multiple markets for a given set of tokens, but in reality, given that the publisher still is the main data token whale, and you want to have this heuristic of trying to be as fair to people as possible, even if they didn't, maybe there wasn't even a full understanding of what they were doing when they staked and stuff, right? So how can you bias towards fairness as much as you can? And this, as you know, has been a core principle for Ocean. So in this case here, like, it would be very nice if there was a way to do a snapshot. I'm not so sure there is, I'll be honest, right?
That's no problem. I mean, I'm doing this with GraphQL, and like you can do, so like for the strategies that we are doing now to give the people the voting rights, there's no problem. To get everyone that's in the pool, it's no problem. It's just, it's one query and then you have it.
Yeah, you can do that, but here's the challenge, right? So remember how Ocean, we did 2 migrations to the Ocean token last year, right? One of them in order to bump up to the remaining 51%. And the second one because of the KuCoin hack. And in the first one, right, we encouraged liquidity providers to remove all the liquidity, et cetera, right, from the different pools. And most of them did. A few of them didn't. And because they were given weeks, I think months even, advance warning, then Ocean Protocol Foundation had no moral imperative to make them whole if they didn't pull out. Most of them pulled out. A few didn't. Because it was a small number left, Ocean Protocol Foundation decided basically to be nice, basically to airdrop anyone who had their token stranded. Now, why were those tokens stranded? It's because Ocean token itself could be paused, right? And if the token is paused, then any AMM can't do anything with it because all the AMMs need to be able to operate on actions inside the Ocean ERC20 token, right? They need to be able to do transfer or approve, send, that sort of thing. And as soon as the token is paused, none of those are possible. So the AMM itself gets broken. And so when the second migration happened due to the KuCoin hack, this is all without notice. So OPF then airdropped everyone, all the LPs accordingly as well there. And all of them because they had no warning, of course, right? And it just had to be done. So, and once again, it was possible because of the pausing of the Ocean token. Here's the thing. Data tokens are not pausable, the ERC20 tokens that exist right now, right? So even if you say we're going to snapshot people and copy and paste and deploy a new token in the in Polygon, those existing pools have the data token and Ocean side by side with it, right? So people would always be able to pull out. No one can stop it, right?
You can. I mean, you start the migration by running a minting attack on your own pool.
Yeah.
Basically, you know, like taking out all the Ocean, then you have it.
Yeah.
Then later people cannot take it anymore. So that's. I mean, even if it's not possible, the creator of the pool can still do this attack. Yeah. And if they, I mean, if they do it for a good purpose, it might be a way to do it. But yeah, I'm still thinking about this idea, and
you hit the nail on the head actually on how to do it, right? So this is exactly the right way to do it. And I believe we've discussed this before, but if not, it's a great idea, right? Because it's almost like it functionally achieves the same thing as pausing the token, right? It means basically that whole pool is worthless, right? And well, there's Ocean in there, but you can drain out the Ocean, and then you simply airdrop in the Matic pool, right? The Polygon pool, and that is a very pragmatic thing, right? So I would, frankly, I'd love to see if you did this, right? Set the right expectations with the community, and with your LPs, set the right expectations to them, give them advance warning, maybe, or maybe just do it, because if you don't give advance warning, if you do give advance warning, then they might do their own thing. So I don't know the right answer to that. But basically, as long as you have this principle of fairness, then everything else will follow, right? So,
yeah.
But I mean,
well, I think even with the word, so like back with the like KuCoin hack and back with like the upgrade contracts, we still have people today like in the chats like, oh, what happened to my Ocean tokens? Why can't I pull them out? So I mean, Robin, if you just do it without no warning, then I mean, I don't think it matters at the end of the day.
Yeah, they're going to come anyway. That's true. Yeah. And I can understand that, right? Because like, I hold several tokens, and I don't pay attention to most of those tokens on a day-to-day basis, or even a month-to-month basis, right? I might check in a year from now and see, oh, how's this token doing? Oh, cool. Or oh, crap, right? It's 0, right? So whatever. So I think we can assume that some people also treat Ocean tokens that way, and that's completely their prerogative, right? So, and also data tokens, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm dealing with these people in Telegram a lot, so
exactly.
They come like, I put this much many in this wash data set. Now it's only much less. What can I do? I'm like, you have to wait. If people put in new liquidity, you will be fine. If they sell now, they lose all the rights that they had to anything.
Exactly.
So
yeah, I mean, right when we released Ocean Market, we explained how Ocean Market worked, and we talked a little bit about the risks. But then, as it was clear that people were using this in like really, more aggressive ways than we initially expected, we very quickly adapted and wrote a lot more. Did a lot of things, if you recall, put a lot more warnings in a lot more places, banners, and this and that, and wrote blog posts about this and expanded the web pages to describe it, basically to try to give people as much understanding as they can. And so, like, there's bells and warning flashing symbols and stuff everywhere. And if people miss that now, then,
they do.
They do, right?
They
Yeah,
still
and
do.
they do for sure, right?
Yes.
But I understand it too, right? Like I think about if I go to a new web page and I click accept, right? Like just let me do the stupid thing, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Did you ape into any data sets, Trent, during the early days, the betas?
I'll be honest, I didn't, because I actually, my my ocean holdings are all, frozen basically, right? I don't want to touch them. I don't want to show a single ocean moving or anything, and I don't want to,
Yeah.
Frankly, I bought ocean on the open market because I want more ocean. I'm investing in myself and ocean, and that's, and I love to see that, people aping in and stuff, but I just didn't want to, move any of the ocean tokens. I know that the community likes to watch my holdings, and I think that's really cool. So that's why I held back from doing it.
Oh, that's funny. People know your address, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh,
The Telegram channel watches, or at least they have the addresses of different whales and stuff, right? So being a founder, I obviously have a lot of ocean tokens. So
yeah, I mean, there's one project now building from the last DAO round, and they are like basically building a website where they can track all the big wallets and all the amounts of ocean where they are located. So then I mean, I know this platform called Nansen AI. So that they are basically then offer you also the option to name the different wallets. So at some point, maybe then the wallets will have some name. This is Trent's wallet. This is Trent's wallet number 2. So like, I mean, on Ethereum, everyone is kind of doing that already to track the different kind of activities and stuff. So with Ocean, this probably will also happen at some point.
Yeah.
And you can even see, okay, how did the people? Yeah, it could be that. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Imagine it's just a Google sheet, right? Where each row is a different Ethereum address. Like one column is Ethereum address, another column is the label or the description. Yeah. So it's going to happen. And if you think about it, people investing in that data set would invest in it and be incentivized to keep improving it too, right?
So, that's true, yeah. So you can have a theory first, and then other people can vote on it, and then you can come to a conclusion. Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting then also to track how the people were deciding, what were they voting for in the different DAO rounds and so on. So I mean, like, this is all public information, right? That can be accessed. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So okay. So I want to go in leeway into, I guess, you did write a new blog post just today, but you did mention in an article in one of the in the blog post about Nature 2.0, and then I was reading it, and I just wanted to know, I guess, more of like the topic of like the AI like DAOs, and like what was like, I guess, what your theory on that is, and I guess where our future is going to be, because
for sure.
Yeah, and you said you did work, so you did drop that you were working on like deepfakes, in the back when you were doing like military research and stuff. I mean, do you...
yeah, I'll clarify all that. So when I was working for Department of Defense in Canada, and really like this is Canadian Department of Defense, right? So they have like 2 tanks, and and it was I was focusing on audio radar, right? So it was just building classifiers that would classify among audio radar signals. Then actually, the company that I did after that was on creative AI, and it was automated creative design of analog circuits, like connecting this transistor with this resistor with this other transistor in this configuration in order to get like a behavior like an amplifier or a low pass filter or something. And I expanded on that in my PhD as well, actually. I'm actually very proud of that work. It's like, to me, to this day, very, very cool work. And it shows how to reconcile sort of knowledge domains from engineering and with AI. And actually that even had a big influence on my token engineering work in the last few years. On deepfakes, I've never worked on deepfakes myself. Deepfakes happens to be another example of creative AI. But I was doing, my own version of creative AI, which was typically evolving designs in the space of graphs. So like analog circuits. On the Nature 2.0 stuff and AI DAOs and roadmap, sort of long-term view and vision, I actually have another blog post called Starships and Tokens, and it lays out something that I call the map. And you can think of it as like, have you ever played the video game Civilization? One of the civilizations?
Civilization, yeah.
Yeah. And so in Civilization, and actually many other real-time strategy games, there's these technology trees, right? the technology tree is like, okay, first you invent fire and the wheel, and then that leads to this and this, to the steam engine, to trains, etc. Right? So why don't we do that for humanity itself? Right? Why don't we have some big DAG, directed acyclic graph technology tree for humanity to figure out, what things matter going forward, right? Like, where does Mars fit in? What are the things that lead to Mars? Where does, if we want to explore the cosmos beyond, what do we need to get to before that, right? And so I did this in this article. I wrote this all out, and then I also sort of posited a way where we can even crowdfund these future ideas in simply an ICO type fashion. But to me, the meat of this article was really about just like the deep thinking that I did around this technology tree, this roadmap basically for the future. And one subgraph of that was basically Nature 2.0, where it had some of the nodes in the graph, some of the technology artifacts are things like self-driving, self-owning cars, right? So, and then a whole fleet of those, right? So imagine there's a decentralized Uber out there, which will come. And imagine though each car in the decentralized Uber is its own corporation that owns itself, or a DAO using Wyoming laws or something, right? And you don't have to stop at cars, right? You can also have self-owning power charging stations for the cars. And you can have self-owning power grids, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what's cool if they're self-owning is that they're a lot like nature, right? Because like, what's a tree, right? It's kind of there. It doesn't really have a concept of ownership. It's just there. It takes resources from the environment around it. It takes nutrients from the soil, and it takes CO2 from the air and sunlight, and converts this into oxygen and wood, right? And it does that basically mostly in a benefactory way to humanity, right? And it's not just trees, of course. It's forests of trees, and it is the soil and the flora and fauna around us, and the weather, et cetera, right? So there's sort of this existing Nature 1.0, and the idea of Nature 2.0 is to use the same philosophy as Nature 1.0 as this sort of cradle of civilization, and then add silicon and steel in the form of things like self-driving cars and so on. But they also add this layer of, a new layer for a cradle of civilization. And what's cool is with those, these cars, for example, a self-driving car, it can charge at first to pay for itself. But once it hits a surplus, once it's paid for itself, it hits a surplus. What does it do with the rest of that, right? Well, one cool idea is that it pays out UBI, Universal Basic Income, right? And this actually resolves the big problem of AI, where AI is taking more and more jobs, and that's not going to let up. It's going to be more and more. So why not let the wealth created by AI feed back to humans, right? And so you can basically have these autonomous organizations help pay for humans. And to me, I'm very pro UBI, because then any given human can start to chase their own dreams of self-actualization, right? Why stop at basic income? Go for self-actualization income, right? USI. And and you don't need to rely on governments either. If governments do this, great, but why not just use technology that is now at our fingertips? So that's the long-term vision of Nature 2.0. And it's starting to move ahead bit by bit, right? The technology is getting there, and I'll talk more about that. And then also there's initiatives like Sovereign Nature Initiative, SNI, that Ed Hesse with Energy Web Foundation and others are driving forward, and that's just really awesome. I'm very excited about that. So macro level graph is the map. One subgraph of the macro level graph is Nature 2.0. And a subgraph of that, which is sort of like the prerequisites, is basically ocean and other sort of substrate level technology around the elements of computation, data, computation itself, and bandwidth, and the related protocols. So, on the data side, you've got data access control, which is ocean, and monetization, which is ocean. You've got data storage, which is things like Filecoin or Arweave. For computation, you've got things like Golem, or smart contract computation like Ethereum. And for bandwidth, you've got decentralized bandwidth markets like Helium or Orchid or others. So, and that's really the near-term thing, right? And that's where Ocean fits into this grand scheme. So Ocean is going to help unlock these things, some of the visions of Nature 2.0, which in turns help to unlock UBI/USI. And addresses some, fundamental challenges that humanity will face. And those in turn can help lead us into sort of some very exciting eras towards, exploring space and so on, right? So that's I guess also a long answer, but hopefully it helps to put everything in context.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, I mean, Nature 2.0 is also very close to my heart. I mean, I participated in Odyssey, and I met JP and talk about his vision and everything. So I mean, Data Union app is also trying to fit into that. Like we're trying to make it possible to get the data, to get the algorithm for the self-driving car. Like the AI will not be there for everything right away, but it will need some kind of data. It will need some kind of guidance by humans. So I mean, the AI will not be able to teach itself. So yeah, that's where I mean, I like the idea to make something like this happen. So I think such a platform is necessary to make this possible. And then the people already get shares in the algorithm, by providing the data, by helping it. And then this also directly gives them back part of the income that the AI will later make. So yeah.
Exactly. And I'm glad you mentioned JP, because JP Doomernik, he's probably the person who spent more time on Nature 2.0 than anyone else on the planet. So full shout out to JP. Really awesome.
Okay. So with that, I guess we can just go into your the new article that you wrote about NFTs and then fungibility. And I know you were breaking it down how, I guess, the RAC like token, is it really like an NFT, or is it really actually like a fungible token? Just like, because you can have one, but then there's like pieces, I guess it's all traded, because you can have 0.05, right? Which is like, I guess there's different, I guess now it's just like fungible.
Yeah. So before I talk about the article, I will mention that there's at least one more article on the way where I laid a much more comprehensive sort of foundation / framework for how we think about NFTs in Ocean. And you've seen hints of this in the past in all the data tokens articles that I've written in the past, as well as the white paper. But and how data relates to IP and IP relates to data. And I'll talk a lot more about that in the coming article that hopefully will be in the next couple of days. But for this article, this was sort of I wrote it because it was something that was bugging me for a long time, and I'm I guess slightly OCD on this, and I really wanted to just write the thing, put it out there, even if no one liked the idea and stuff. I thought it was really important. And by background, a few years ago, actually, I won't talk about there's a solution, but I'll talk about the problem first. And it's a smaller problem, but it is, to nerds like me, it really matters. So yeah, like you had mentioned, Jim, RAC, the musician, put out this token called Tape, ticker Tape, TAPE, and there was 100 of them, 100 of these tokens, and they're divisible, and they got released on a bonding curve, and there was the price went up and up and up to $800, and I think they're at $2,000 or $4,000, whatever I put in the article. If you go to Zora, you'll see. And each one of these tape tokens is fully fungible with the other. You can swap one tape token with another token, and it doesn't matter which one you have, right? It's just like a US dollar bill or a Bitcoin. You don't care which Bitcoin you have. If you have 1.0 Bitcoin, you have 1.0 Bitcoin, right? Same thing with these tape tokens, right? And that is, the fact that you can interchange one with the other is the very definition of fungible, not non-fungible, fungible, right? And it's the same thing for Unisocks, right? And like you might think, what the heck, Unisocks? Like, what's that, right? And it's if you haven't heard about them, the Uniswap team rolled them out more than a couple of years ago, where there was 500 SOCKS tokens, ticker SOCKS, and also divisible on a bonding curve. But also they put them on the Uniswap exchange as their own pool. And so you could buy them on the bonding curve, or you can buy them on the pool, swap them back and forth. And there was a balancing then, of course, arbitrage.
Before you go any further, I just wanted to know, I guess, the whole thing about like the bonding curve. What is like the bonding curve?
That's probably a distraction here, but I guess you can view it as a way to, you can think of it where it's a special smart contract where as you dump more liquidity into it, it will mint more tokens. Okay. And it might be where, you dump one, say Ethan, and you get 1.0 SOCKS. But then to mint the next 1.0 SOCKS, you might have to put in 2 ETH. And the next 1.0 SOCKS, you might have to put in 3 ETH. And it could go up linearly or as a square or exponentially or whatever, right? It's just our way to do a token distribution. We actually looked at them in detail for data tokens, but the problem is they're kind of like robots that have a very fixed price depending on the number of tokens. And they kind of get in the way of automatic price determination like you have in AMM. So that's why we don't have them in Ocean market, at least default right now, right? You could actually, there's future stuff. Invented by Simon de Rouvier a few years ago. Him and I have talked about them at great length, and I think they're super cool. But this is how RAC token and SOX tokens happened to get released. But the main thing is that these tokens trade on the open market with AMMs, et cetera, right? And the other main thing, though, is that these Unisox tokens, just you can redeem them, by the way, for a pair of socks. So the tape token you can redeem for a physical cassette tape that RAC put out with his limited edition, right? There's only 100 total. For the socks, there's 500, and you can, at any point in time, you can send 1.0 tokens to the Uniswap team, and they'll mail you physically a pair of socks, right? That's a Uniswap on. So I kind of view, tape token is clearly, you can view it as a sculpture or work of art, but it's also music, right? And Unisocks, you can also view, interestingly, given the price, they're now at like 80 grand, and they've been as high as 150K or more for price for one pair of socks tokens. Then it's sort of like art too. But here's the challenge, right? With each of those, these tokens are ERC20, right? Fungible token standard. And what I described already, they're swappable, the very definition of fungibility, right? But at the same time, these things land squarely in the NFT space, right? Like NFT, like RAC is a major member of the NFT community and continues to do really great stuff in the NFT community. And then also, so those are sort of like cracks in the wall, or like I titled my site, like sightings of fungibility in NFT land, just like we have sightings of UFOs that are hard to explain, right? And there's other sort of sightings, right? Like let's say that you say you're issuing a limited edition NFT of 10 editions, right? And let's say no one cares about the serial numbers, which is often the case. In traditional art world, a lot of time people don't care, right? So I have, let's say an NBA Top Shot card. If you go to NBA Top Shot, there's a lot of limited edition, like they're mostly limited editions of 6 editions or 10 or whatever. They don't even show the serial numbers, right? So I've got some trading card, NFT card, and I should be able to swap it, that card, one of the editions of that card with another, right? And given that there's no serial number visible, then they really are should be viewed as a swappable thing. Yet they are considered NFTs, right? So they're considered NFTs, yet they're fungible. What's going on, right? And then finally, ERC 1155 is this kind of weird thing in that it's sort of this shades of gray of fungible and non-fungible. You can issue a single token for a thing, and then it's clearly non-fungible, but then you can issue a second one, and then you've got fungibility because you can swap one thing for the next, right? So, lots of confusion. And then the question is, okay, like, what do you do about this, right? How do you think about it? And there's, I was banging my head against the wall on this for a while. I was just actually frustrated by it. Like, what the heck, right? Like, this is, doesn't make any sense. But then I realized, actually, there is a way to think about this where I can just let go and just like much smoother and calmer. And the answer is simply NFT means two things. The technical spec for unique snowflake, aka non-fungible thing, and the field. That's it, right? And there's a history for this, right? AI is like this. There's, lots of people argue about whether something is AI or not, right? Does it have to be, replicate the behavior of a human to be AI? Does it have to pass the Turing test, et cetera, et cetera? There's 20 different definitions from a technical side, right? But there's also the field of AI, right? So there's a technical definition that people argue over for AI, and there's a field of AI. Same thing for blockchain. There's a technical definition that people argue over, and there's the field, right? If you ask a Bitcoin maximalist what's a blockchain, they'll say it's only Bitcoin, right? Or you can say it's a distributed ledger or whatever, right? There's lots of definitions, and people can argue about that till the cows come home. But there's also just the field. And I actually wrote an article about that 3 or 4 years ago, just saying, if you consider blockchain as a field, it's much easier and you don't have to argue anymore. So same thing for NFT, right? NFT is the technical definition, right? Which is essentially the token standard. ERC 721, et cetera, and the field, right? And it turns out there's actually the field is, it's basically this blockchain field that is focusing on creative stuff, right? Art, music, etc. But there's actually also a second blockchain field for all the non-fungible stuff, like all the unique snowflakes, things like supply chains, like Centrifuge doing, or real estate, right? Things that are truly non-fungible, and also should fit within that definition. So overall, then, what I had said, there's a definition of two things: the technical thing and the field. The field is really two fields, right? The field of all blockchain related to creative, art, music, etc., and the field of all blockchain related to non-fungible stuff. And then, on these concerns of tape being ERC20 or socks being ERC20 and 1155 or limited editions, that's okay, shake it off, no worries, simply because it's part of the field, and that's enough, right? And so if you say, okay, the NFT field includes this, you're good to go, right? And by the way, the NFT field, it basically covers all copyright, right? Like IP, where there's like copyright is part of IP, and to get a copyright, it involves creating an artifact like on a medium with sweat off the brow, and that's basically copyright. So data largely fits into that too, right? So I'll stop there. But that's the article. It's a very simple article, right? Yeah. Just saying, okay, you know what? NFT is not only this technical spec, it's also a field. And then, way less frustrating.
So, but if I create a data token on the Ocean Marketplace, I could also say you can now redeem something physical for it. If you give me one data token, I could also make a limited edition, 100 tokens. I can say, okay, you send me one of the tokens, I will send you a package to your home. Yeah, I mean, this would be an easy integration of this concept, right? Anybody can do it then there.
Yeah, well, I mean, within definition 2, right, where it's NFTs includes IP, then data is IP, right? So, Ocean, there's an easy argument to say that Ocean fits within the world of NFTs, right? In that way. It doesn't happen to use ERC 721 right now, but it still fits in within this world because it's about IP. And Ocean itself, Ocean Market, is actually, we built it tuning for data, but it actually works for all IP. And as you've seen in Ocean Market, we've had people put on music samples on there and other forms of creative IP, right? So, and it actually has way better licensing than most, so-called NFT platforms because it's actually got licensing.
I bought a picture that somebody painted from Ocean Marketplace.
There we go. Yeah.
I think you did.
And the physical, it actually doesn't matter whether it's physical or not, right? Because IP accounts for both the stuff inside computers, which is implementation on, a hard drive or bits on a floppy disk, whatever, or implementation of paint onto canvas, right? So copyright covers both because there's still a physical manifestation. It feels a bit more ephemeral with, sort of computer-based stuff, but copyright law still applies, right? To both. So, so even the Ocean contracts out of the box, you're actually probably good to go. You don't even need to modify them, right?
So I don't know if you can see on the screen, but Ocean Krill wants to know, what's your favorite book?
Sure. Let's see here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of books that I love. Probably my favorite book is Autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. It was one of the first really great autobiographies ever written. And, I read it in my 20s, and it was totally inspiring because it was a lot about continuous self-improvement, as well as a lot of super pragmatic thinking, right? Like Benjamin Franklin, he was the guy that came up with quotes like an apple a day keeps the doctor away, right? And all these sort of other farmer's almanac type stuff. And I really like that too, right? So he's super pragmatic. And also his career is amazing, right? He started off as an entrepreneur. He happened to be a publisher. And to do a really good job as an entrepreneur, he just wrote a lot, right? That's why he wrote the Farmer's Almanac, because he had exclusive rights to publish them as himself, right? And then he made a bunch of money from that. So then he essentially retired and did science. And that's where he basically, connected electricity to lightning and did a bunch of other amazing science. And then to cap off his career, he co-invented the United States of America, which is now the longest running democracy, and actually a really beautiful design if you look at how it balances power. So like, amazing dude, and the book is amazing too. So book recommendations for the future of data, blockchain, and AI. So I do have a blog post that half answers this from 2 or 3 years ago on, I think it's called something like recent readings in singularity and AI or something. And it talks a lot about stuff that is very inspiring to people working in blockchain and AI. And data is sort of the underpinning for this, right? So I think that's very useful to help paint a picture of the medium term and the farther term future. In that list, it has things like Rainbow's End, which is sort of like a really great near-term vision of how augmented reality will play out, or Accelerando from Charlie Strauss, which starts at the near term with augmented reality and other stuff, but then extrapolates, faster and faster and faster into the future, such that at the end we're like 1 million years from now and everything's changed and it's all Dyson spheres. And there's also a couple books by Daniel Suarez, Damon, and Freedom TM. And these have a very Nature 2.0-y feel to them. In fact, that's where I got some of the inspiration for Nature 2.0, especially the second one, Freedom TM, where there are swarms of self-driving cars around. And in the book, they're more of a negative framing, and I twisted it to a positive framing. And I should mention, these books have influenced a lot of other people in blockchain land too that I've talked to. So I think that's some. In general, science fiction to me is the best inspiration for a lot of the stuff in the future, right? And rather than just reading one sci-fi, try to read as many as you can, and then paint your own picture of where you want the world to be based on these things, and then create it, right? Like Alan Kay says, the easiest way to predict the future is to build it. And he didn't say it in the sort of Zen way. He didn't say the easiest way to predict the future is to build it. Instead, he was actually making a presentation of the mouse and the new graphical user interface to his bosses at Xerox PARC, right? Because he had just invented all that stuff. And they just saw all of that and they're like, yeah, but you say this is the future, but how can we predict the future? No one can predict the future. So he said it in a very exasperated way. He's like, what are you talking about? The easiest way to predict the future is to invent it, right? And he had just invented it and they couldn't see it in front of them, right? So I really love that context. And it plays here, right? Because overall, right, like what future do we want? And part of that future, a keystone for that future, if you will, is to make sure that we have sovereign data, right? For ourselves personally, but also at higher and higher level groups with families and small organizations and enterprises and nations and so on, cities. And so that's what Ocean is about, right? To help make sure that we have that baseline keystone, which will help to unlock the rest. So I see it as a prerequisite to all this other stuff, as I mentioned with, the map and Nature 2.0.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's no, I really like that point because I know everybody has this like negative view, or whenever somebody talks about AI or like robots are gonna take over, we have all these like military stuff and that, are all this or like blockchain or just it's all gonna end up being just negative or just like taking over like humanity, and then it's just gonna end up in a bad space. But I think what like the future holds is that we are just gonna make that ourselves. Like if you really want like the future not to be that, then you have to be part of the movement to make it better, be in the positive light.
Absolutely. I can't agree more. Yeah.
And that's absolutely a good point to end the show. Huh? I think we're running out of time. And
Yeah,
you had your alarm going off because, next meeting is coming up.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I have to go to bed too. But
All right.
it's definitely a good way to end the show.
Yeah. So to building the positive future.
Exactly. And thank you very much for joining us, Trent.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely, Trent. We gotta do this on another episode. I do want to keep picking your brain more, So yeah, let's have another episode sometime in the future when more ocean stuff comes out. But hopefully everybody here in the podcast or my ocean sailors loved the this I guess spontaneous live stream. So we're gonna have some more guests come in soon in the future. But anyways, you can probably find the new YouTube or this episode on YouTube. But yeah. All right,
Great.
guys.
All right.
Let's end this.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again. Cheers.